The wind off the Arizona flats carried the smell of iron and alkali, and it never once apologized for either. The autumn of 1879 arrived in Copperhead Gulch, the way bad news always did, quietly, without warning, and with no intention of leaving soon. Eliza Raines had been watching the town die for 3 years. She stood at the window of the Territorial Land Office on Main Street, her fingers resting on the sill, her dark eyes following the same wagon she had watched roll in every Tuesday morning for the past 18 months. It was always the same 2 men on the bench, always the same canvas cover tied too tight over the cargo bed. Always the same route, straight down the main road, left at the blacksmith's, and then gone, swallowed by the narrow canyon road that led up to Harlan Creed's mine. Nobody asked what was in the wagon. Nobody in Copperhead Gulch asked anything about Harlan Creed anymore. Eliza turned from the window and sat back down at her desk. She was 24 years old. With copper-brown hair she kept pinned under a wool hat during working hours, and eyes the color of creek water in November, clear and cold and patient. She had come to Copperhead Gulch from Flagstaff 2 years ago, hired by the Territorial Land Office to keep records and file deeds. She was good at the work. She was better at the silence. On the surface of her desk sat a leather ledger, open to a page of neat column entries. Beneath the desk, tucked inside the lining of her spare coat hanging on the back of her chair, sat a second ledger, identical in size, different in every other way. The one on the desk recorded what Harlan Creed's men told her to record. The one in the coat recorded what was actually true. She had started the second ledger 14 months ago, on a Tuesday in September, when she had noticed that a deed transfer for the Hollowell family's grazing land had been backdated by 11 days. 11 days before Jacob Hollowell had actually signed anything. 11 days before Jacob Hollowell had, in fact, died in what the sheriff called a riding accident out near the eastern ridge. She had not said a word. She had not changed her expression. She had stamped the deed, filed it in the correct drawer, and walked home in the evening with her hands perfectly steady at her sides. That night, by lamplight, she had begun writing down everything she knew. The problem with knowing the truth inside Harlan Creed's operation was that knowing it alone was worth nothing, less than nothing. In fact, it was dangerous. Creed controlled the mine, the water rights, the sheriff's salary, and the only telegraph line running out of the gulch. He had been systematically acquiring land across the southern Arizona territory for 4 years, and not a single acquisition had been honest. Drought-weakened ranchers found their water diverted without explanation. Farmers who refused to sell woke to find their barns burned. Those who pushed back too hard had a way of ending up in the official record as accidents. Eliza had documented 41 transactions. She had cross-referenced every deed date against the death record she quietly accessed at the county clerk's office on her lunch breaks. She had noted the names of the 2 men who always arrived with the Tuesday wagon. She had written down the dates, the cargo weights she estimated from the wagon's wheel depth in the soft ground near the blacksmith's turn, and the names of the homesteads that went silent in the weeks that followed. She needed to get out of Copperhead Gulch. She needed to reach the U.S. Marshal's office in Tucson, and she needed to do it without Harlan Creed knowing she was gone until she was already there. She had been planning it for 6 weeks. The morning she chose was a Wednesday, the day after the wagon, when Creed's men were occupied with whatever they did, with whatever they brought in. She arrived at the land office before sunrise, as usual, lit her lamp, opened the official ledger to a fresh page, and began entering routine deeds she had deliberately left incomplete the day before. She worked slowly, carefully, filling every column with clean, uninteresting figures. If anyone came in before she left, it would look like the beginning of an ordinary workday. At 7:30, she put on her coat, she straightened her hat, she picked up her regular canvas satchel, which held her lunch tin, a spare ink bottle, and the hidden ledger wrapped in brown paper and tied with the same string she used for official documents. She walked out the front door, locked it behind her with her key, and turned north instead of south. South was town. North was the road to Wickenburg, and beyond it, eventually, Tucson. She had a horse stabled at the edge of town, a gray quarter horse she had been boarding quietly at the McCready livery for the past month, paying in small amounts spread far enough apart that no one would think to connect the payments. His name was Cinder. She had chosen him because he was plain and unremarkable, and because he had a deep chest and sound feet, which mattered more than looks for what she needed him to do. She was 3 blocks from the livery when she heard the boots. Not one set, several. The particular rhythm of men moving together with a purpose, not just walking. She did not turn around. She kept her pace even, her satchel loose at her side, her eyes on the corner ahead. She counted her steps. 7, 8, 9. Miss Raines. The voice belonged to Cole Decker. She knew it without turning. Decker was Creed's head man, lean and deliberate, with a narrow face and the kind of patience that made him more dangerous than the men who were simply violent. He had been watching her for weeks. She had known it. She had counted on having more time. She stopped. She turned around with an expression of mild surprise. There were 4 of them. Decker, and 3 others she recognized as Creed's mine security. 2 had rifles. One had his hand resting on the grip of his revolver in a way that was meant to be noticed. "You're up early," she said. "So are you," Decker said. "Where are you headed?" "Bakery," she said. "I like to get there before the bread's gone." Decker looked at her satchel. "Heavy bag for a bread run. I have work to bring back with me." He smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Mr. Creed would like to speak with you. This morning. He's very sorry for the short notice." She held his gaze. "Of course," she said. "I'll stop by the office after I—" "Now, Miss Raines?" Decker said. The smile stayed. "He's very particular about mornings." She walked with them. She had no other choice. But as she turned to follow, she shifted the satchel slightly on her shoulder and let her thumb slide along the strap, feeling the shape of the wrapped ledger inside through the canvas. Still there. She had not let go of it once. Harlan Creed's office was at the eastern end of Main Street, on the 2nd floor of the building that had once been the Territorial Bank before Creed bought it, absorbed its deposits, and folded it into his own operation. The office itself was large and deliberately impressive, a mahogany desk shipped in from San Francisco, 2 leather chairs, a wall of maps so covered in notations that they looked more like war plans than land surveys. Creed himself was standing at the window when she was brought in. He was a broad man in his late 50s, with white hair and the kind of deliberate calm that powerful men cultivate over decades. He did not turn around immediately. He let her stand. "Eliza," he said finally, turning to face her. He used her first name, the way men like him always did, as a reminder of the distance between them. "I hope the walk wasn't too cold." "I've had worse," she said. He gestured to one of the chairs. She sat. Decker stood behind her, near the door. "I'll come to the point," Creed said, sitting across from her and folding his hands on the desk. "There's been a discrepancy in the Alderman tract filing. My attorney noticed it yesterday. He believes the date on the original transfer doesn't match the date in our office copy." He paused. "I'd like you to correct it." She looked at him. "Which direction?" she asked. He studied her. The question was too precise for an innocent person to ask. They both knew it. "Move it back 8 days, he said. She nodded slowly. "I'll need to pull the original file." "Of course," he smiled. "Decker will accompany you." So that was how it was going to be. He didn't know what she had. He wasn't sure yet, but he was closing the distance, and once he confirmed what she knew, there would be no riding accident on the Eastern Ridge for her. She was the land office. She was the records. She was the only person in Copperhead Gulch who could make his entire operation collapse from the inside with a single stack of paper. She stood, smoothed her coat, picked up her satchel. "I'll have it corrected before noon," she said. She walked back toward the land office with Decker 2 steps behind her, and she did the only thing available to her, she thought. The satchel held the hidden ledger. If Decker came inside the office with her, he would eventually see it. If she tried to run now, on foot, they would have her before she reached the North Road. Cinder was still at the livery, 3 blocks in the wrong direction. What she needed was a minute. Just 1 minute alone. She got it. Unexpectedly. When a freight wagon coming down Main Street lost a wheel not 30 feet ahead of them, pitching crates of dry goods across the road in a sudden crash that pulled every eye on the block toward the chaos. Decker's attention broke. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Eliza did not run. Running draws eyes. She simply changed direction casually, unhurriedly, stepping around the edge of the crowd forming around the wagon wreck and moving at a walking pace toward the alley between the assay office and the dry goods store. The moment she cleared the corner and was out of Decker's sightline, she moved, She went left, then right, then cut through the gap behind the feed store that she had memorized 6 weeks ago specifically for this moment. She emerged on the back road behind Main Street, and she walked fast and quiet toward the livery, her boots finding the dry ground without sound. She was saddling Cinder when she heard the shout from the direction of Main Street. Decker's voice, sharp and controlled, even in anger, giving orders. She tightened the cinch, slung her satchel over her shoulder, and led Cinder out of the stall without rushing, because the livery boy was watching and she did not want him to remember panic. She nodded to him, paid what she owed for the week, and was in the saddle and out the livery door before anyone appeared at the end of the road. Then she rode. The north road out of Copperhead Gulch climbed steadily for the first 2 miles, before it leveled onto a broad plateau of scrub and red stone. It was open country, good for speed, bad for cover. She kept Cinder at a canter, not a gallop, saving his legs for what was likely to come. She watched the road behind her. They appeared at the plateau's edge 20 minutes after she did. Not 4 men this time. 6. She could see them clearly, small dark shapes against the pale morning sky, moving fast. They had better horses than she did, or they thought they did. Creed would have told them to take her on the road, take the bag, and make sure she didn't arrive anywhere. She knew this road. She had ridden it every week for the past 2 months, always alone, always noting the terrain. There was a dry wash, 3 miles ahead, that crossed the road at an angle, shallow enough to cross in the summer, soft enough now in autumn to slow a horse that didn't know it. She knew exactly where to cross it. They didn't. She let Cinder stretch out. He had been waiting for it. He opened into a long, ground-eating stride, ears flat, chest pumping, and the distance between her and the 6 riders grew for a full mile before it began to close again. They were pushing hard. Too hard. She filed that away. At the wash, she angled left, 40 yards off the road, crossed at the firm gravel shelf she had found on her 3rd reconnaissance ride, and swung back onto the road on the other side without breaking stride. Behind her, she heard the first horse stumble, then a shout, then the sound of a second horse pulling up lame. She didn't look back. She had 2 miles to the canyon road, and if she made the canyon road before they recovered, she could hold her lead into Wickenburg. But as she crested the low rise before the canyon, she saw the rider, one man, sitting a buckskin horse sideways across the road. She had no choice but to pull Cinder up. The horse dropped to a trot, then a walk, blowing hard. She kept her hands visible on the reins and assessed the man. He was somewhere past 50, with a weathered face under a flat-brimmed hat, a gray duster, and a rifle laid across his saddle with the casual ease of someone who had held one for so many years. It had become part of his resting posture. He wore no badge. He wore no expression that she could immediately read. "You're riding awful fast for a Wednesday morning," he said. "I have somewhere to be," she said. He looked past her at the road she had come down. He could hear the distant sound of riders regrouping. "Those men following you?" "Yes." He looked back at her. "You do something that warranted it?" "That depends," she said, "on whether you think exposing 41 fraudulent land transfers, 14 suspicious deaths, and 3 years of systematic theft across the Southern Territory is something that warrants being chased by 6 armed men." He was quiet for a moment. "You have proof of that?" he said. She patted the satchel. "Everything. Original documents, copied entries, dates, names, cross-referenced against death records from the county clerk. It's all in here." He looked at her for a long moment. The hoofbeats behind her were getting louder. "What's your name?" he said. "Eliza Raines." "I'm the Territorial Land Office clerk for Copperhead Gulch." She held his gaze. "From the first morning I walked through that office door, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know yet what I was going to find, but I decided on that first morning that if I ever found something worth knowing, I was not going to look away from it. I was not going to waste what I knew." He studied her face for 3 full seconds. Then he moved the buckskin out of the center of the road and positioned it so that he was beside her, facing back the direction she had come from. "Keep riding," he said. "Don't stop until Wickenburg. Ask for Deputy Marshal Orrin Hayes. Tell him Walt Breckenridge sent you." "You're just one man," she said. "I'm aware of that," he said. He settled the rifle across his forearm. "They're about to be aware of it too. Ride, Miss Raines." She rode. Behind her, She heard Walt Breckenridge call out to the approaching riders in a voice so flat and certain that it cut through the morning air like a blade. She did not hear what he said. She did not slow down to listen. She pressed Cinder forward onto the canyon road and did not look back. She arrived in Wickenburg 2 hours and 40 minutes later, with Cinder dark with sweat and her own coat dusted red from the road. She found the marshal's office without difficulty. She asked for Orrin Hayes. She was told to wait. She did not sit down. She stood in the middle of the small office with her satchel held in both hands across her body and waited. And when Orrin Hayes came through the inner door, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s, with a territorial badge and the particular eyes of someone who had learned to listen before speaking, she set the satchel on his desk, untied the string, and laid out 14 months of silence, the ledger, the cross-references, the 41 deeds, the 14 death records notated against the transaction dates, the names of Creed's men, the route of the Tuesday wagon, noted with dates and estimated weights. Every page in her careful hand, every column exact, every entry verifiable against the official records still sitting in the locked drawers of the Copperhead Gulch Land Office. Hayes did not interrupt her. He read in silence, turning pages slowly, and his expression moved through something she had not expected to see on a lawman's face in that moment. Not just recognition of what she had brought him, but something quieter and heavier than that. Something that looked like the particular weight of encountering courage after a long time in its absence. "How long did you keep this?" he said, when she was done. 14 months, she said. Inside his operation, behind a false panel in the east wall of my office, second panel from the door. He looked at her for a long moment. "Were you frightened?" She considered the question honestly. "Yes," she said. "Every day. But being frightened and doing nothing felt worse than being frightened and doing something. I had a position. I had access. I had the ability to record the truth when no one else could." She paused. "I was not going to waste that." Hayes sent riders out within the hour. He sent a telegraph to the territorial governor's office before that. He assigned 2 deputies to ride back toward the canyon road, and they found Walt Breckenridge walking his buckskin calmly toward Wickenburg, unhurt, with the information that 4 of Creed's 6 men had turned back when they understood what they were riding into, and that the other 2 had made decisions they would be explaining to a circuit judge in the near future. The arrests in Copperhead Gulch began the following morning. Harlan Creed was taken from his mahogany desk office at sunrise, still in his dressing clothes, with a look on his face that she was told conveyed genuine disbelief not at being caught, but at who had caught him. Cole Decker was apprehended at the North Road checkpoint that Hayes had established overnight. The mine's operations were suspended pending investigation. The Tuesday wagon was impounded. Its cargo, once inventoried, added 6 additional counts to the territorial charges. Eliza was in Wickenburg for 9 days, while the initial proceedings were arranged. She stayed in a room above the post office, slept better than she had in 14 months, and on the 3rd morning walked down to the telegraph office and sent a message to her sister in Flagstaff. 2 words, "Coming home." On the afternoon of the 9th day, Walt Breckenridge came to find her. He was sitting on the bench outside the post office when she came down the stairs, his hat on his knee, the buckskin tied at the rail. "You heading back to Flagstaff?" he said. "Eventually," she said. "Hayes wants me here for the preliminary hearing. Another week, maybe 2. He nodded. He turned his hat slowly in his hands. He was not a man who spent many words, and she had already formed the impression that the ones he did spend were worth waiting for. "That thing you said," he told her, "about not wasting what you had." She waited. "I spent 12 years as a deputy marshal in this territory," he said. "Pulled my badge in 1871 after a situation I didn't handle the way I should have. Been riding freelance ever since, doing enough to eat and not much more." He looked up at her. "I've been telling myself for 8 years that there wasn't any use in me anymore." She sat down on the bench beside him. The afternoon light came across the street at a low angle, warm on the adobe walls, and the town moved around them in its ordinary afternoon way. "What made you stop on that road?" she asked. "Saw you riding?" he said. "Saw 6 men behind you. Saw that you weren't running, scared you were riding to something, not away from it." He shook his head slowly. "Woman riding toward something with 6 men behind her, carrying what she's carrying. I figured whatever she was going to, it was worth helping her get there." Eliza looked out at the street. She thought about the first morning she had walked into the Copperhead Gulch land office and seen the rows of ledgers on the shelves and felt, for reasons she couldn't have explained at the time, that something in this place was deeply, quietly wrong. She thought about the 14 months of patience, the cold mornings, and the careful handwriting, and the weight of knowing a thing that she could not unknow. She thought about Jacob Hollowell's deed, backdated 11 days. "There's a process starting now," she said. "That's going to take the better part of a year to work through the territorial court system. Hayes told me he'll need someone who understands the land records to help his office organize the evidence for trial." She paused. "He mentioned it pays a regular deputy's salary." Breckenridge looked at her. "I told him I might know someone," she said. He was quiet for a moment. A rider went past in the street. The buckskin at the rail turned his head to watch. "I haven't carried a badge in 8 years, he said. "I know," she said. "But you stopped on that road." He turned his hat in his hands once more. Then he set it back on his head. "I suppose I did," he said. The trial of Harlan Creed and 11 associated defendants opened in the territorial court in Tucson the following spring. The proceedings lasted 6 weeks. Every charge was supported by the documented record that Eliza Raines had assembled across 14 months in a small land office in a dying town. The deeds, the dates, the names, the cross-references, the 41 transactions, the 14 deaths. On the morning the verdicts came in, Eliza was sitting in the second row of the gallery. She wore a gray dress and her hair down, which she had not done in public since she arrived in Copperhead Gulch. Walt Breckenridge sat beside her, a territorial deputy's badge pinned to his duster, his hat on his knee. He had worn the badge for 4 months by then. It suited him. When the foreman stood and began reading, she kept her hands folded in her lap, and her face composed, and her eyes on the front of the room. She did not allow herself to feel anything until the last count was read, and the foreman sat down, and the room broke into noise around her. Then she let out a breath, slowly, completely. Beside her, Breckenridge said nothing. He simply reached over and laid one hand briefly over hers, the way that people do when there are no words proportionate to what has just happened. Outside, the Tucson afternoon was bright and warm and ordinary, the kind of afternoon that the people who lived through the winter could never quite take for granted. Eliza Raines walked out of the courthouse into it with her head up and her hands still. She had walked into a corrupt operation with nothing but a position and a decision. She had made the decision every morning for 14 months. She had not looked away. She had not let herself unknow what she knew. She had not wasted a single day of the access she'd been given. The ledger had told the truth because she had been willing to write it. That was all. That was enough. That was everything. Sometimes, life places us exactly where we need to be, not on a grand stage, but behind a quiet desk in a town nobody's watching. Eliza had no power and no allies. She had a position, a pen, and the choice to show up honestly every day. That was enough. Whatever small corner you hold today, don't underestimate what it means to simply refuse to look away. A small note for you: this story was imagined and written by AI, offered here for your entertainment, and crafted with the sincere hope that it leaves behind something worth carrying.